Karakia. Welcome everyone to today's Regs meeting. So we will begin with the Karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hia ki ana te atakura, he hia, e hauhu, tihei Māori ora. Thank you, everybody. As I said, welcome today to everybody, including those who are come to participate in the meeting and those who are here to observe. Please, the committee members, could you let me or the Democracy Services advisors know if you intend to leave the meeting? Morning tea will be at 10:45. I am an apology for early departure, and pleased to say that Councillor McNulty, as Deputy Chair, will be stepping in after morning tea. So we do have, I think, an apology from Pāenga-whāwhā Kelly, and as I said, mine for early departure.
And
I move.
Councillor Paul will be departure early because she's up at a tangi.
Okay,
well.
so and Councillor Paul for early departure. So I move that we accept those apologies. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor McNulty. We'll now put that to the vote. Did we add the Councillor Paul? Yep. Komana, that's carried. Do I have any conflict of interest declarations for today's agenda? Don't see any. Confirmation of minutes. I move that the minutes of the Regulatory Process Committee meeting held on the 16th of February 2023, which have been circulated and hopefully read, I move that they are confirmed as an accurate record of that meeting. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Pāenga-whāwhā Holden. We'll now put that motion to the vote. And that is carried. So we do not have any items which are not on the agenda, so we'll move now to public participation. And I'd like to invite to the table or up to the podium Peter Lambrechtson from the Donald Crescent cul-de-sac residents.
Very well said. That's probably the first time my name has not been butchered, so congratulations. Very well.
Thank you.
Very impressed.
Just before you begin, because you're down as an organisation, you do have 10 minutes, but that needs to include some time for questions from our committee members, absolutely, if you'd like to.
So yeah, I'm here representing the residents at the end of Donald Crescent, so that's sort of my organisation, for want of a better word. Why are we here today, and why I'm specifically talking is specifically about the broken yellow lines as part of TR 4827, I think it is, where they want to install broken yellow lines on Donald Crescent, which is where I currently live. The issue that I have with broken yellow lines in regards to cul-de-sacs in general is I think it's not a very common situation for that to happen in the wider Wellington region. I did a bit of research, and I have some lists here of the number of, or how frequently broken yellow lines exist in cul-de-sacs in the Wellington region, now, at least specifically in Karori. After spending far too long on Google Maps, and have some examples here, effectively there's only sort of 3 streets that are cul-de-sacs that actually have broken yellow lines, and one of them is Donald Crescent. The other 30 or so that I spent spending time on Google Maps had nothing. And for me, it's a representation that the residents in general have not managed to talk amongst themselves, sort out parking issues amongst themselves, and are now putting that responsibility onto the council. I think it would be a much better use of everyone's time for me to not have to be here at all, and for us to actually have sorted this problem out amongst ourselves as residents in the cul-de-sac, rather than having to get the council to be enforcement. And yeah, that's the start of my argument in regards to why I'm against having these broken yellow lines installed. The next issue that I have in regards to how the broken yellow lines have evolved over the years in Donald Crescent is we have had, I think, 1 or 2 residents that have decided to take it upon themselves to paint their own broken yellow lines. I had an email conversation with the local City Council representative as part of all of this, and I said, So what's the situation if a resident decides to paint their own broken yellow lines? Their response is, well, actually, it's illegal. The only way that broken yellow lines can legally be installed is if the council does it as part of a TR resolution. And if anyone is interested, I have some history from 2008 from Google Maps, all the way through until just now from the street, where this resident or residents have installed their own broken yellow lines. And this has actually exacerbated the parking problem in the area, because what previously was available between 3 to 4 parks has now been reduced down to 1. And now the council is further proposing additional broken yellow lines in a quiet cul-de-sac to further reduce the parking, or further reduce the on-street parking available to residents. I'm not sure if anyone wants to see these photos, but excuse me. It has been frustrating, and for me, it again highlights the problem that when residents take upon themselves to effectively install illegal broken yellow lines, it exacerbates the problem of lack of parking, and it also doesn't actually resolve the problem where they could actually just go and talk to their neighbours and say, hey guys, you're parked really badly, it's impacting my ability to get in and out. The lack of dialogue and the arbitrary decisions in the way that they have made their particular choices has frustrated neighbours rather than actually having open and honest dialogue amongst all the neighbours. And again, we are talking about a short cul-de-sac where there is only way you can go, or the only way you can come in and go out is via the entrance into Donald Crescent. The primary argument that the council put forward was that services are unable to get through. So emergency services, fire, ambulance, everybody else. I'll just present up a photo here outside of my house at 11 Donald Crescent showing a fire truck getting through, which happened about a year ago. It also shows cars parked on both sides of the road, and happy to hand that around if anyone wants to have a look. A year and a half ago, when we had a fire and we called up emergency services, they were able to easily get through. Yes, it is a tight cul-de-sac, primarily exacerbates the problem, and my argument saying that services are unable to get through, well, at this time services have been, I actually went out and put in an OIA request through to Wellington City Council asking how often has rubbish services been unable to get through across the wider Wellington/Korori region. It was in there for 23 days, and until I continued to bug them and say, so what's going on about this OIA request, I didn't get a response. Thankfully, yesterday, midday-ish or so, I got a response. Over the last 2 years, there have been 6 instances across the entire Korori region where services, i.e. rubbish services, have been unable to access these things, access the street that they're supposed to go to. 6 instances over the entire Korori region in that last 2 years. 4 of those instances were due to slips. So if we're going to have the argument to say, and the remaining 2 were to do with parking. So if we're going to say that this is a significant problem as it was described in the TR resolution that emergency services have been unable to get through, you would think that this would be a widespread problem across at least all of Korori, or ideally all of Wellington, which is where I put my original request in. And to me, it doesn't actually seem to be a frequent problem because rubbish services are there once a week, every week, and recycling services. And the fact that the response over that 2-year period only had 2 instances over the entire Korori region, I think sort of goes to say that if there was a significant problem and residents were not able to actually sort it out themselves, this would be quite a very easy thing to talk about and to have lots of information about. Again, I have a table here showing the specific instances where rubbish trucks have been able to go. Oddly enough, the times that they were not, with the slips were around the massive storms that they had last year in August as well as in February. So again, these are things that are outside of the control of anybody, and to say that this is due to parking rather than slips is yeah, I think it's a bit of a nonsense. Where much of this problem has actually stemmed from in regards to it being a tight position or a bit of a pinch point is outside my house at 11 Donald Crescent and across the road at 18 Donald Crescent. At that point, there are a number of trees that have been growing over the last 15, 20 years, and since I've lived there, they have continued to grow outwards rather than upwards into the crescent. At that same area, there is a berm where about 3 cars have parked. Because the trees have continued to grow outwards, the cars have continued to push outwards into the middle of the street. there has been a request to get those trees at least trimmed or removed with the City Council. I have a TR reference number here where they were supposed to get removed in November last year. That never happened. The TR number is 366983. If the council had actually gone and trimmed these trees or removed these dead trees, there would be a whole lot more space and this pinch point would not exist because cars would be able to easily flow through. I would please implore the council, understanding that everyone is busy, to at least look to remediate this in a timely manner, or at least once the trees have been remediated, then have a further discussion about whether or not yellow lines need to go in. Because in my view, once the yellow lines have gone in, there is no chance of them ever getting taken out. And I would actually, one of the questions that I'd like to ask at the end is how often have TR resolutions happened in the reverse where yellow lines that have been installed, do they ever come out? Because I personally don't think that ever happens. Continuing on from the visibilities issue, if the responses back to the TR resolution have focused on poor visibility from the trees. The responses back from the council were, well, there is currently a request to remove the trees. The issue has been there was misunderstanding with which particular trees they were talking about. There is a request to remove dead trees, which is across the road from us. However, down the other end of the cul-de-sac is where there is quite a large hedge, and a number of the respondents have said, can this hedge be please trimmed? Two completely different situations, two completely different things. The problem with the hedge is it's on private property, and unless we as residents in the street talk to the owner there, I don't think we have much ability to force a particular resident to trim their trees if it's within their property, which is actually the cause of the visibility issue that a number of residents have talked about. Again, I have a copy in here where the response back from a particular residence was, this work which the council has committed to do, TR number 366 blah blah, will permit the cars to be significantly further to the west, closer to the boundary at number 18, further to the centre, further away from the centre of the road. That will remove the problem with the parking markings where the road is overly narrow, so that any parking restrictions is unnecessary. The response back from the council was the feedback with the trees and the problem associated with them has been passed to the Parks and Recreation team for a short-term and long-term decision making. From the feedback received, the residents reported issues associated with the lack of visibility caused by the trees. They are talking about a completely different section of the street, talking about a hedge, rather than the actual focus where we have said, these trees are growing out, they sit on a berm, can you please just trim them, please? That would be awesome. Continuing down the merry little list.
Peter, you will need to wrap it up.
No, very soon, no worries, it's cool. Another response that I've had back is parking is illegal on a berm. I find that interesting. Has anyone ever been to Brussels Street in Miramar? That is effectively one big berm where multiple cars park down on them. I'm not sure how actively enforced this has been. Realistically, residents just need a place to park. And for, summing up, I think the long-term consideration of having these broken yellow lines installed is going to impact my generation, my children, and everybody else in the Crescent for generations to come, without properly taking into consideration that there is a problem now. The residents have not been talking to their neighbours, and yeah.
Thank you, Peter.
Cool.
That's certainly a very eloquent and full explanation of your point of view, so thank you for that.
Cheers, thank you.
We haven't really got time. But
not a question for you.
Oh,
It's
yes.
just for, I see we have a few people from Donald Crescent talking. Can someone please leave time for questions? Because there are a few that are from here.
Thank you. That's a good point, because there was actually at least one question for you, but we didn't have enough time. So can I welcome Barry Young? Is Barry here?
Online.
Oh, online. Welcome, Barry.
Yes, I am. Hello there. Hey, can you see me?
I can.
Yeah. Am I there on the TV or something? Yeah. I really admire the skills of the last guy. He's very articulate. By Jove, he's certainly done his research, hasn't he? So, yeah, very impressive. I've just got a little presentation. It's super quick. I'll be over and done with. Are you looking at it now?
Yeah. Barry, I have to point out that for some reason you've got 5 minutes, not 10. Peter sort of did the residents, sort of put himself forward as your residents representative, so he got 10.
Okay, it's a different cul-de-sac.
Okay.
Yeah, completely different thing.
Sorry,
Yeah.
different issue.
Is there still broken yellow lines? Absolutely, but a different street. So this is Elliott Street in Johnsonville. I want to talk about. So can you see my presentation? You've disabled it, right? Okay. Are you looking at my PowerPoint? No? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, I'm trying to give you a presentation on my PowerPoint, but it says you've disabled my screen share. So if you have
of you, Barry.
Oh, okay. Yep. So how do I scroll to the next one? I must admit, I've just started using PowerPoint, so I've got I basically just started yesterday, so I'm just apologizing in advance for my skills. All right, I'll just get to it then. So let me just go through my slideshow anyway. Yeah. So where is it? I'm a bit nervous, sorry. Where is it? Yeah, all right. So, slideshow. So no stopping at all times. There's broken yellow lines, 11 meters outside a kindergarten at Elliott Street, Johnsonville. It's not really a good idea because it's going to benefit only one or two people, and it's going to inconvenience dozens more because it's a busy kindy during the morning and in the afternoon. Apart from that, it's super quiet. And all my time living there, 12 years or so, I've never ever known it be congested, and I've never ever known police, ambulance, anyone, ever any accidents or issues at that junction. So just saying, I have never experienced or witnessed anything like that. So my objections, the net parking impact to remove 2 unrestricted parking spaces only favors a small number of people. Pedestrian impact will be a dramatic change because the use of the pedestrians, mostly the kindy parents, are going to have to drop off and collect children from further away, and it's a very hilly area. And especially when you got parents, they're going to be with strollers and with little kids and stuff, and they're going to be walking a much longer distance and possibly in the rain and with strollers and stuff like that. It's really not going to make anything any easier at all for anyone, apart from maybe a couple of neighbors, which I'll get to in a minute. As I said, there have been no accidents or issues in the 10 years plus that I've lived there. I've never witnessed anything like that. Busiest times, only a brief period in the morning, like around 9 a.m. and in the afternoon, 4 p.m. This time the traffic is, after this time, there's virtually no traffic, and that junction is clear anyway. So it's a very quiet street, to be honest. It's only like busier during the 9 and 4 p.m. when the parents have to drop off the kids to kindy. So the average pickup and drop-off time for the kindy parents will actually increase because of this. If you install the broken yellow lines, because they're going to have to park further away, it's going to introduce more congestion due to the longer time parked further away. Is going to increase the average drop-off time and the total time elapsed for parents to do what they need to do to drop the kids off. So that is not going to make anything easier. It's going to lead to more congestion, if anything, not less. And I can't see how you can't see that, because it's just mathematics. Because if you have to take longer to drop a kid off, you're parking your car for longer on a street. So anyway, just don't understand that. So the reasons for the change, I believe, are just biased because because someone is using their property as a commercial enterprise. So they've expressed safety concerns for the driveway, which I've already discussed. There's no safety concerns in all my experience. I've never, ever seen any accidents there whatsoever. When drivers park close to the driveway, access to the property is compromised. Well, it's not really, because the only where it is compromised is if they have large vehicles and trucks trying to reverse up as a hilly driveway, which is right next to the kindy. And that's what my neighbour's doing. Yep.
But Barry, but you will need to wrap things up.
Yeah, okay, I'll be super quick. The neighbour is using his property as a storage unit, and he's got vans and lorries driving up at least once a week, maybe twice a week. It's the reason why the broken yellow lines are only going to benefit a couple of neighbours. And the reasons are because he's using it as a commercial enterprise. And if you look at the back of the slideshow, I've actually taken pictures. This is just the other week of a lorry reversing up his driveway during the busy kindy time, and there's parents and children trying to get past this huge lorry, spewing diesel fumes, and it's dangerous to unload heavy goods anyway at these times. So it's not good for the kindies. And the last one, if you look at the end one, the pallets that he's using to unload, he's just dumping them on the side of the street for people to collect. And as far as I know, Elliott Street is not a commercial area. It's a residential area. So why is he dumping pallets there? And
okay, Barry,
the kindy, can I just say the kindy's been there for a lot longer than he has, and there's never been any issues with them. So it doesn't benefit me whatsoever. You can put the yellow lines in. It doesn't make a difference to me. It's just what I feel sorry for is that the kindy parents is going to inconvenience them a lot, and it's not fair. It's not fair.
Okay, thank you, Barry. That has again been a very eloquent presentation, and
I doubt that very much.
Thank you for the photographs, which have made the situation, a little bit easier for us to understand. Thank you. Right, so I think we need
Am I done now? Can I go?
Yes, you may go.
All right.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you guys for listening to me. I really appreciate that. Thanks for giving the opportunity. I'm sure which way you're going to go, but at least I've got to say what I said. So, yeah, I know what the council's going to do. All right.
Thank you. All right. Karen and Fowley and Carrick Lewis, would you like to come and speak to us now? You have 5 minutes, and as the point was made, there have been some questions about Donald Crescent. So,
Kia ora koutou, ko Kieran Fowley toku ingoa, and thank you very much for the opportunity to chat with you today. And I appreciate that you've received a number of submissions on the proposal to remove 8 parks from Donald Crescent, and it will have been pretty hard to digest all of that information. So just by way of a quick summary, 8 submissions were in favour of the proposal, 12 were against, 1 was in favour of some aspects of the proposal, but not others, and 1 looks to have actually been misclassified, I think, in the submissions. The focus of my comments is very much on the end of the cul-de-sac, so namely that's the 33 metres of broken yellow lines between numbers 13 to 20 and a further 16 metres along the western side of Donald Street. And this includes yellow lines across some garage entrances as well too. Of the 12 submissions, as you've heard from Peter, against the proposal, almost all flagged the potential benefits of widening the road through removing a line of trees along that western side of the cul-de-sac, which would enable residents to park a bit further to the left-hand side of the road, which they can't do currently because the branches are just overhanging and just make it impossible to do so. And those trees have been long-standing health and safety issues since we moved to Donald Crescent about 10 years ago. I know there were proposals into the council then asking them to remove them. They haven't yet at this stage been implemented. Unfortunately, I think the council hasn't, in its responses to the suggestions by the residents, really fully responded to why that might not be a feasible way forward. I think in general the responses do feel a bit pro forma from my perspective, and I do think that potentially undermines the credibility of the consultation process, given the volume of comments made and no amendments have been considered on receipt of that feedback to date. Removal of all of these parks would have quite a significant impact on residents' access to their properties. It will push congestion further up that street, and it will force residents to park on some neighbouring streets, such as Donald Street. This would definitely cause security issues, not just for vehicles, but also, as mentioned in the submissions, the personal safety of a number of young people. In particular, there are a number of young women now living towards the end of the cul-de-sac. It will also significantly impact access to these houses by trade vehicles and visitors, in particular elderly relatives. I'd therefore really like to urge the council to consider trialling the alternative option first of removing the trees to create a wider space and seeing how that goes before moving to the slightly more drastic option of removing a proportionally significant amount of parking from the cul-de-sac. And just to put it in context, removing 8 parks, there's about 25 houses in the cul-de-sac in the residents, Donald Crescent. So you're taking away around 30% of the parks available for, proportionally to the number of houses in the cul-de-sac, it's around 30%. So it is quite a significant amount of parking we're talking about. I would say also just quickly that the parking situation in the Crescent has eased quite significantly following the exit of residents from a large rental property that did have multiple cars. So I think it's highly likely that a more pragmatic approach may resolve the problem identified in a much lower cost way. And I think any outstanding concerns could be dealt with through the parking management plan, which has been cited in the Council's response as the vehicle for dealing with suburban parking needs over the longer term, and I think would also ensure that Donald Crescent is being treated in an equitable way to other parts of Karori. And it could include, for example, consideration of whether resident parking zones may be an option there to manage parking as well. So I'll finish my comments there. I did have some more things to say, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, because we've got Councillor Calvert, Councillor Chung and Councillor McNulty. Yeah.
Thank you. And to the previous speaker, so essentially what you're saying is, as a solution going forward, is just to remove the trees, see what difference that makes,
Yes.
and then look at whether there's some other opportunities around residents parking.
Yes.
There was the previous speaker talked about illegal yellow lines. Is that an issue from your perspective, or is that?
I wasn't aware of that until my neighbour made me aware of that, so it's
Right.
not something I was aware of previously.
Okay. Is that something that you think should be removed, or does it make a difference to the overall solution?
I think, as Peter has said, by including additional yellow lines, which may not have been legitimate or legal, that has further sort of congested the parking down the end. So I think to the extent that may be part of the solution, I don't know. Sorry, I'm not really fully aware of where those illegal yellow lines have been painted. But certainly, if it's caused greater congestion down the end of the street, then it could be part of the solution as well.
And just one further one: if could you get would the residents be willing to work together with our officers to come up with a?
I would be very
solution?
willing to work with the officers to come up with a better solution, because I do think this has quite a significant impact on a very small community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we'll have to leave the other questions for the next Donald Crescent person, if there's time. Thank you very much. There obviously are quite a few things elected members would like to know about this particular situation. So I'm now going to welcome up Janet Boutel. Also, it's also about Donald Crescent, I believe.
Oh, thank you. For those of you who aren't familiar with Donald.
Yeah. Just the point is being that I think we are getting quite a picture of it, but there are some questions. So, yep, thank you. Oh. Okay. Janet, would you like to either stand, yes, at the podium or, yeah, that's lovely. And
now, can you reset the clock, because I'm starting it now.
Okay, fine.
So if I run over the 5 minutes, then, it's his as well.
We'll reset.
Okay. For starters, the markers in the existing yellow lines, as you know, are wrong. The council is going to initiate a project like this. The information at least needs to be correct. Otherwise, the whole plan could be null and void. As you have heard, the important thing is to maintain access to the turning circle. There are two narrow pinch points, 14 and 18, where vegetation is growing on the council reserve. Number 14 has vegetation right up to the asphalt, and number 18 not quite as much. There's a question here about whether the road reserve areas could be used to widen the street. The council's response was, "We have looked at the option of road widening. However, Donald Crescent does not have physical space for us to proceed with this change." This is obviously not true. In the problem areas, that is approaching the turning circle, there is plenty of space, up to 3 metres in places. This is exactly the sort of thing that the land reserve is for. If the road is defined as the level drivable ground, the road frontage is deemed to start where the paving ends. Actually, it's the council who narrowed the road in the first place, because the current asphalt surface is narrower than the previous chip seal surface. So this problem is of the council's own making. The council ethically needs to re-widen the road back to where it used to be, and that would make enough difference to solve the problem. Now, yellow lines. The council's stock response was, our intention with the broken yellow lines is to prevent drivers from causing major accessibility issues and reinforce to drivers that it is illegal to park vehicles in the grass berm area as per the Land Transport Road User Rule 2004 Part 6. The reference to the Land Transport Rule is extremely misleading. The relevant part of the rule is actually 6.2 subsection 1. What it says is, you may not park on the road margin if it would damage grass, shrubs or flowers. I've got the actual wording here if you want it. But what it means is that parking on the road margin or grass berm is actually preferable to parking on the roadway proper, as long as you don't damage any grass, shrubs or flowers. That is the exact opposite to the council's response that claims, falsely, that legal parking on the road, it is illegal to park on the road, and the officer's response here is completely wrong. Now, trees outside number 18. The question is, whose job is it to look after the berm? The council at one stage said they would help, then they said it was the residents. I think one of our speakers has got more to say on this, so I'll leave that for now. But for number 18, just cleaning up the road margin would add something like 1.5 metres of extra clearance. Peter's talked about the macrocarpus. They're dying because of marauding carcas coming in from Zealandia, and they're killing the trees by peeling off the bark looking for insects underneath. Eventually, these trees will have to be removed. And with inflation on the way, it's better to do it now before people get hurt or property is damaged. This is a safety issue. To say that the problem has, quote, been passed to our Parks and Recreation team is entirely inadequate. Traffic people need to consult with Parks and Recreation people properly. Just sending off an email is completely unacceptable. The proposal, therefore, should be put on hold until the council comes up with a coherent, unified response from all the departments involved. Now, car parks. The council response to this was, to build a car park, residents will have to apply for an encroachment licence. All the cost to remove and built car park will be adhered to residents. That doesn't even make sense. Anyway, nobody's talking about building car parks, and none of the existing garages encroach on the road reserve at all. This is completely irrelevant and shows once again that the officer has completely misunderstood. Incorrect interpretations and response errors and inconsistencies in this proposal. And finally, to sum up, the council's proposal is not suitably validated inside the council. It should not be necessary for the citizenry to draw attention of one part of the council to the fact that their proposal is inconsistent with another part of the council. Also, I would have expected that all the relevant information, I had to research it myself, should have been included in the initial notice. The council, as the party initiating this issue, should have supplied the affected ratepayers with any acts, bylaws or regulations involved. Otherwise, I'm afraid the consultation would simply look like a box-ticking exercise. The points I've listed above show that many of the responses...
So, Janet, I will need to ask you to wrap up because we're out of time.
Okay. The points I have listed above show that many of the responses from the council are at best misleading or irrelevant, or at worst, plain wrong. Any lawyer would make mincemeat of this proposal. Obviously, the proposal in its current form cannot go ahead. It needs to be completely reworked in consultation with other council departments. As it stands at this point in time, the proposal should be withdrawn. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you. I am actually going to allow a question because we have a backlog of them. Now, I think I might have... Were you actually before Ray? Okay, Ray. And make it quick, please, Ray, if you don't mind.
Thanks very much. As you know, I was invited to come up to have a look at the Donald Crescent, and so
I've mentioned that.
Yep, and I parked up there, and where I parked at the end of the street, you may recall, someone was telling me that that is actually part of the problem where I parked. So would a better solution be to, say, have yellow lines just around the end where the cars turn around?
There are some yellow lines. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, and not have the do you think that it would be okay to not have the lines further up the street, but just around the end of the cul-de-sac? Do you think that would work?
There are some yellow lines there, but when I said right at the beginning that the council information about the white lines is incorrect, last time they came up to deal with those lines, they repainted all the existing ones, they painted the fake existing ones, but they didn't even know that there are existing lines in the turning circle already. They completely ignored those.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't think we've got time for any more now because we've gone over time. But thank you very much. We have still got another person presenting on Donald Crescent. So thank you very much for your information. It's appreciated. Mandy Britnell.
Hi. I'm the sole presenter in favour of the proposal, and I live at number 18, which have got the trees outside. So a couple of items from the other submissions I wanted to discuss was that multiple submissions against the proposal are from the same household, and I think that skews the results, because we've got some which did one submission per household, and then you've got other households in opposition did 4 or 5 submissions. So I do think that skews the results a little bit. Also the use of names that are not their correct names. It's not, when we talk about 8 car parks, that's the whole street. The other ones are up the other end, which nobody has talked about them. Around our end and where our trees are, that's more like 3 or 4 parks. So it's those people that are affected. I'm not sure that the first speaker, who he was representing, he wasn't representing me or a lot of the other residents that I know of. So just bear that in mind when he says he's representing the residents of I'm sure he's representing some of them that are not here, but certainly not all of them. I think that the yellow lines do need to go around the side because the people there are parking over into their driveways, and it goes over the footpath and into the turning circle, which does make it difficult to turn around. I also think that our vehicles are restricted going down between us, number 18, and number 11. There's been multiple times when trucks and service vehicles have not been able to get down there. They might not have been reported to council, but there's certainly been times when our rubbish hasn't been collected or we rang up and say that they couldn't do it. A case in point is 2 weeks ago when the contractors who trim all of the bushes and trees down all of the roads were in our street, and I went and said to them, oh, good, will you do the ones, the trees outside number 18 because they're overhanging? They said, no, we can't because there's cars parked there. So if the cars hadn't been parked there, they would have been able to, trim those trees, as everybody has actually requested. We organised the job that's been quoted to get the trees cut down. We organised the councilman to come up last year. He looked at the trees and said, well, we have trimmed them in the past, the tops of them, but now that they are dying from the top, we will need to take them out at some stage. So he said that they were not unsafe at the moment, so it's quite a low priority. We get an update every month or so from the council about where that job's up to. He also said that there are about half of the trees are the very big ones that will need to come out. About half of them are other trees that are about, say, 3 to 4 metres high. They were going to leave all those. And we talked about that when they cut down the big ones, they're leaving the stumps, and we will replant trees around them. So there was no suggestion that area would take up less area than it currently does. And this, when we talked about it, fits with the council's objective, which was noted in these submissions, to maintain the existing green areas for the ecological and livability value. These are the only larger trees in the street, and the 3 metre ones that would be left and the new ones that we would plant would be the only green areas for the birds and so forth. We're also down below the road, so if that area is removed, the road runoff from the rain would just go straight into our property. As far as turning that area into parks, widening the road for parking, as pointed out by the council officer, is contradictory to the council's objective of zero carbon emissions. I don't really see why we should be removing green spaces to cope for households that are increasing the number of cars that they have. You know, that's been cited by several people as a reasoning for the parking getting worse. There's not one car now, there's several cars and people have to park them off the road. On the road, and I don't really see why we should be getting rid of green spaces for that. And if, as several other people have said, the council pointed out it's illegal to park on those berms anyway. So actually they shouldn't really be parking there at the moment because it's right up to the road. So I'm in support of it. I think removing the trees is sort of not the option at this point. It doesn't fit with the council objectives. It's already the Parks and Recreation people have been up to see it. They've already got plans to replant it, well, for us to replant it. And I do think the yellow lines should go on, which would assist the parking restrictions.
Thank you, Mandy. We do have one question. Can you make it really swift? Thank you.
I'll share my experience going down the street later. But when I drove down on the weekend, my view was every single house on that street had one, if not two, off-street parks. Was that at the end of the cul-de-sac? Was that correct?
Yep. Yeah, but a lot of these people, as someone else pointed out, are not using their garages for their cars. Parking them across the street.
Right, well, thank you. That's been helpful. It's always good to hear both sides of the argument, so thank you very much. Right, so we'll keep moving. We have Alex speaking on Kent and Cambridge Terrace and Cable Street and the Oriental Parade intersection. Alex, I've actually only got you down for 5 minutes. I hope that's okay.
Kia ora, Sarah. Kia ora koutou, ko Alex Dyer aho. I am speaking today in support of a couple of traffic resolutions on behalf of Cycling Action Network. Thanks for your time. Specifically, there's TR 1823 and TR 6023. There's the bus lanes on Kent and Cambridge Terrace and the Cable Street and Oriental Parade intersection. I'll just speak to the Oriental Bay intersection one just briefly because that's not many things to say other than, really support making a better connection for people on bikes and ensuring that's safe and comfortable for people walking to and from the waterfront as the bike lanes get through there. I'll just note for your information, I recently, on behalf of Cycle Wellington, lodged a complaint about the Homegrown Festival. It just kind of highlighted that, the waterfront is being used in a way that's not that helpful, shall we say, at certain times, and compressing the space that's available to people on bikes and walking. So that's going to become more of an issue as cycling volumes increase there. To the bus lanes on Kent and Cambridge Terrace, really support this full-time bus lanes change, getting people to be able to enjoy their bus journeys and have more reliable journey times, more smoother journeys is a great thing to see the council doing, and we fully support it. Would like to see more assertiveness in this area over time. So some reflections on these designs. The bus lanes that are being upgraded to full time, of course, they're not full length of these two large roads yet, and I hope that they can be extended. There's north of Elizabeth Street if you're heading south, and there's north of Alpha Street to connect with Courtney Place intersection. I hope that these will be longer than they are in this TR in future as well. There's still an issue, I guess, with on the Cambridge Terrace side. these designs still retain the curbside parking, which I just note for everybody's awareness that will still create quite a bit of friction, I imagine. So I hope that there's some monitoring of how much friction that keeps for the bus use of people parking and leaving their cars. The basin, of course, is still going to be a gap between the bus lanes further south that are going to be in force. So there's still that's still a shame that there's not a connection between these full-time bus lanes through there. And wanted to really highlight the issue of enforcement. So we're really interested to see what the detail is around enforcing these full-time bus lanes. And we're interested to see if the council will be, and between council and Metlink and police, there will be the ability to use onboard cameras on the buses, because they will pick up a lot more detail of the kinds of infringements that buses will encounter for enforcement purposes. Noting, of course, the bus lanes mean that people on bikes still have the option to cycle in these, which is going to be important if the cycle lane is in the centre of islands, for some people to be able to access businesses or side streets along this area. They'll be able to move into these bus lanes and have a bit more separation from those. And the last thing was about the car transporter loading zone, encouraging to hear that there's going to be some form of formalised accommodation to the problem of the car truck party, we call it. The cars being unloaded in live lanes often. So I hope that will be more predictable and less problematic with the introduction of this layout. Any questions? Thanks for your time.
I'm sorry, Alex, but I think we've run out of time because we had to allow a few questions for some of the other matters. But I think it's good to know you're supportive, and thank you again for your views.
Mihi.
Thank you. We'll keep moving on because otherwise we will run out of time. So, Raewyn, are you here?
Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come along and speak to these traffic resolutions. I'm Raewyn Hales. I'm the Access Coordinator for CCS Disability Action in the Central Region, and I want to talk about 3 traffic resolutions that we've made submissions on: TR 3023, TR 2923, and TR 3123. So mostly my comments are pretty general. There will always be people who need mobility car parks to access their communities and to live ordinary lives. So in Wellington, the Greater Wellington region, there are around 10,000 permit holders, and it's been really great to see that council have taken a fairly proactive stance in maintaining mobility car parks when they're removing car parks across many, many different spaces. So thank you very much for that engagement and for the engagement with us to provide that support for people who need those parks. One thing that has been brought to our attention by our permit holders is that quite a few car parks are not being installed with signage, and especially signage that indicates a parking limit. We believe that it's not equitable for council to provide on-street mobility car parks with no time restriction to allow an individual or a resident or a business to use these on an everyday basis. So particularly in Kilburnie, where it's a busy shopping centre, it would be, we would totally support the time limits put on to those parks so that they are available more often for people who need them. It's particularly necessary for people to be able to get to their local supermarkets and to use those mobility car parks. There are very few now that are in the actual shopping centres. on the road, outside on the main roads, and we're losing more to side roads all of the time. So we appreciate that there are still some there, and that the ones that are being moved to side streets. What we'd also like to suggest to council is that there's an education program or something that makes it easier for everyone to find out where you get extra time as a concession for your use of your mobility parking permit. So that is available on the council website, but it is quite difficult to find. So in Johnsonville, where the proposal is for increased time outside of the community centre. That's really great to see that that's being addressed, and it doesn't attract the extra time. So when the community are trying to find out how much extra time they can have for their parking, it's quite difficult to find. So it would be really something that council could do some work on to make that that information more readily available. But mainly I wanted to come along just to introduce myself and to thank council for their support in the mobility parking space at the moment. So made up some time for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Rowan. That's appreciated.
If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer.
And I do have a question. I have noticed that some of the mobility parking times are 3 hours, 180 minutes. Do you think that's, you've made the point that there should be some sort of restriction so we get the turnover. This is around near swimming pools, I think the Johnsonville Community Centre and swimming pool. Do you think the 180 3-hour limit is about right?
I think that it depends on the community that it's installed in, and certainly in that particular area, if you were participating in the activities provided by the community centre or the pool, that people with a mobility issue wouldn't be able to they wouldn't be wanting to duck in and duck out. It wouldn't be something that they would just be popping into a dairy to pick up the milk or something like that. It does require extra time, so I do think that having a really considered and logical response to requests like that is really useful, because it does make it possible for people to attend events at the community centre and the swimming pool and have that little bit of extra time that it takes for their mobility.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. And we do have a couple of other questions. I'll take Nuruddin because he hasn't asked one, and then Ray.
Thank you so much for your submission. I think that's really cool and clear. And my only question is, there are some people whom I see, instead of communities, see the financial side of things. What do you say to them? We're removing this. We're gonna lose this amount of money because we're not making money out of them. What do you say to them? For me, I do support communities need to be having. We need to see from community perspective instead of financial side of it.
Definitely, I think that turnover is essential, because it does mean that people with disability who do have some disposable money will be able to spend that in their own community. So they will be able to use local shops if the provision is there for them to be able to park and access those communities easily. So I think it's having mobility car parks is really productive for businesses as well, and there are no shops in the Johnsonville space that it's proposed for the longer parking, although there is quite a bit of parking and quite a few mobility car parks in Johnsonville compared to some other areas. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Chung, and then I've got Councillor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Randall and myself, we were in Johnsonville looking at the mobility parks in front of the Johnsonville Mall, and coincidentally there was a driver who came up and parked there, so I took the time to actually speak to him to ask him about the parks. So do you think that it would be a good idea to have, say, the parks in front of the Johnsonville Mall to have a shorter time? Because what he said was he went there every day, and have longer parks sort of behind the mall or somewhere else. Like, is there a difference in where the parks are?
Yeah, I think it should be considered, but I also think that enforcement is part of the appropriate response, to have good enforcement so that people don't overstay in mobility car parks, and there's work being done on that, so there's a petition before government at the moment that's hearing some more submissions today as well. So I think that that having good legislation around the mobility car parks and having them well enforced is actually productive as well.
And Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. So my question, I agree with you and I support the mobility car parks. As the city goes and restructures the parking to make the changes that are proposed, do you think that when they come to consider the relocation of mobility car parks, that there should be sort of a, if you like, a limit, or if a mobility car park is in a location for a reason, that really an alternative one should be found within 50 metres, or can it go like 100 metres down the road, as I've seen in a couple of proposals?
The criteria for obtaining a mobility parking permit is not being able to walk more than 200 metres unassisted. And so I think that is a really good guideline for how far away they can be. But clearly for people to be able to access their local GP, other health services, supermarkets, is really important to have them close to that, to those businesses, and to actually enforce them, so that when people who don't have permits use them, that there is a deterrent for them to use them, so that they are available for people who can't really manage without them. And if you can picture the life of somebody who is a wheelchair user, who maybe has to get their wheelchair in and out of a car 2 or 3 times a day, and get into the chair and wheel and then get back into their car, drive to the next appointment. It's an extremely tiring, difficult way to get around. And so by having appropriate mobility car parks, it just makes their life much more able to access the community in an ordinary way.
Thank you, Rowan.
Yeah, thank you. I look forward to seeing you again.
Right. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it.
We're moving on now to Leanne, and apologies, we're running a little bit late. Leanne, we've got you down for 5 minutes.
Thanks. Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Leanne, and I've lived at Ottawa Road for about 17 years. And I'm here about the submission about moving the bus on Ottawa Road. My concern is where the bus stop and crossing goes across, which is across Cummings Park. And I understand and can appreciate why the council is wanting to put in bus markings. The reasons are reasonable. The bus can stop, it's safer for the drivers, and it provides accessibility. But what we can do is actually achieve all of that at or thereabouts where the current bus stop is. And the negative impacts on car parking could be reduced by introducing time-limited parking. That would be in the library car park, but also in Ottawa Road. What we've noticed lately, with other parking becoming more restricted in other streets, is that we're now getting the overflow and people are parking cars are being left parked and not moving for weeks. So, and we're reducing the length of the taper where possible would be helpful, and improving the library car park layout so more parks could be accommodated. Advantages of having the bus at the current location or thereabouts, it provides and allows the community to still have and have safe use of the community green areas and continued enjoyment of those community green areas, ease of access to community amenities. It's a safer option for both motorists and cyclists. And given the closer proximity of the bus stops, you get that benefit of having some space or clearway when the buses aren't running. Wellington City Council has advised me that there's been no
incidents or anything of concern regarding the road at the moment with the current bus stop. Moving the bus north will not improve community safety. It introduces multiple serious safety risks and issues. Where the proposed bus stop is, the driver has actually obstructed his view of down the Cummings pathway because of the structure that's there. So if a bus stop was put there, it would need to be moved back so the driver's not obstructed by the structure or the trees. There's roading bottlenecks. By moving it forward, I think to explain what I meant is that where they're moving the bus forward, there are multiple driveways. And the other issue is on the opposite side of the road, there is a lot of car parks. So at the moment when residents come up the road, they need to stop and wait and then move into their driveways. With the proposed site, the bus will stop, and if the residents are behind, it's like a double step. With the previous site, cars, when it was safe, could overtake the bus if it had been able to pull in and continue on their journey north. There won't be that opportunity to do it at the new site. There's just not enough room, and cars do park. It's actually a site where there's been a few accidents, numerous accidents, where cars have hit parked cars, and also a cyclist got knocked off their bike. And to explain the pathway bottlenecks that I was referring to, at the moment, as you can see there, there's a lot of students standing, waiting for the bus. What you can't see is all the students standing in the car park as well. And this number of students is due to the train bus replacements that happen in the area. What will happen in the normal day is that residents will walk through the car park.
Leanne, I'm sorry to say that I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up quite quickly.
Okay, so and essentially you have two flows of pedestrians coming, one through the car park, and they'll all be converging on a small area of footpath. You'll have residents coming out of Cummings Park, some with dogs because it is a dog park as well. As far as myself as a resident, I'm reversing out on that area. I won't know when to give way. I have students all over the place, and I won't be actually able to know who's moving forward. Are they obscuring people that are moving forward? Because we are talking a large number of students who will be sprawled around that area, which is essentially a corner site. So that was the confusion with giving way. And there's other issues with this area. It is a children's playground, and with having a bus shelter, there are issues about people loitering for criminal intent and looking at properties and also observing children going into the playground.
Thank you for that, Leanne. You've given us some things that we can probably ask officers advice on, so thank you, and we appreciate your time coming to give us your views. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to, and sorry, no time for questions. We'll move on to Andrew. Andrew, are you with us?
Kia ora. My name's Andrew Kosmodakis. I'm representing number 8 Johnson's Drive, or number 18 Johnson's Drive, where I live. This is related to TRA 6423, the bus stop changes that have been proposed. I'm also representing number 12, number 14, number 14A, number 16, and of course myself as number 18. Several other residents have decided not to respond as part of this, as they have viewed that the council will do what the council wants and that their voices will not be heard, which is quite disappointing when you feel that the voices of the city are not being listened to by the people that we've elected to represent us. I would like to ask a couple of quick questions. Who's been to Johnson's Drive in the last month? Who's been to Johnson's Drive in the last 3 months? 6? What do you guys notice about Johnson's Drive? Got another hand up there. Anything that particular stood out? The density of the street, the lack of parking, the lack of footpaths, the density of how the trees are overlapping onto our footpaths and so on, the conditions of our roads. These are the things that have contributed to our response around this stuff, but unfortunately not everything can be documented within 5 minutes. My family have lived in Johnson's Drive since 1985. That's 38 years. In fact, I used to catch the bus at number 16 where the proposed changes are before it was even a bus stop. At the same time, I lived at number 14 where my parents still reside. And as fate would have it, after a few years away, I moved back and I now live at number 18. All 3 houses are impacted by this change. The Chang family at number 16, where the bus stop resides, have lived there for 25 years. The person who's proposed the changes contacted the residents to seek our support. This was turned down with our views as we provided them individually to them. As this impacts our homes, our families and our guests, it had no impact on them in any way, shape or form. They were quite upset that we did not agree with their views. The person was quite argumentative in the fact that we needed to align with their view and that they struggled with the general access to getting to the bus stop, not with the issue of the bus stop itself. A footpath only exists on the opposite side of the street to the bus stop in question, and people walk up and down our street, not on the footpath. That causes more safety issues than the actual bus stop itself. I catch the bus from time to time, and having caught the bus with cars in the car parking spaces that are already there, the bus is able to get right up to the curb on board residents while still exiting clearly and safely. I have even asked the bus drivers if there are any people that struggle, and they have said no. When the bus pulls into the bus stop, the step for the bus is no higher than a normal step in the staircase. Ooh. The footpath only, sorry, I lost my steps over there. There we go. The buses can also kneel and deploy a ramp for those that need additional needs. The challenge is not the bus stop itself on Johnson's Drive, but it's this challenge with the actual street itself, the steepness of our street and the conditions of our street. With regards to our submission, the officer's response focused solely on the physical car parks that are not the overall feedback that we provided, including the proposed alternative solutions. The officer's feedback only aligned to continuing with the proposed changes due to a view on the parks no longer being considered legal. I say no longer being considered legal as these parks were also cited by the council as a solution to the removal of the 7 car parks on the opposite side of the street at number 23 when the formal bus stop was put in place when the system turned into a bi-directional bus system. Now these are at risk also. In fact, some of these car parks in question have council white lines marked on them as well. The same car parks were cited by the council during the as a solution for parking when density dwellings were constructed at number 22 onwards on the same side of the street. Broadmeadows is a single entry and exit suburb. The bus system that was put in place is now bi-directional to minimise confusion of the passengers to the destination of the bus is heading to, which assumes people in Broadmeadows can't bloody read. Broadmeadows was always a single directional bus service prior. Yet if I go to Lambton Quay to catch a bus to Broadmeadows, I have to read the signs to ensure that I'm catching the right bus to my suburb. Sort of defeats the purpose. The bidirectional service in Broadmeadows has no benefits to the suburb and is now starting to show its greater impact. Johnson's Drive, especially from number 12 onwards, is heavily congested with on-street parking utilisation. Density building over the years has increased the use of our on-street parking between number 12 and number 20. Most days you can actually see up to 30 cars parked on the street and across homeowners' driveways to allow for ease of access into property and movement of children and families. The removal of these parking is only going to further increase the congestion across the wider area of the street, therefore increasing the risk to our safety.
So Andrew, I'm sorry, but you've run out of time, so I need to ask you to wrap up.
At the end of the day, this is actually causing us greater impact. The lobby groups that are supporting this are actually not even from Broadmeadows or even from Johnson's Drive to provide their feedback in support of these changes. The feedback impacts us directly in our houses. This proposed change by one person is impacting a minimum of 18 people. I cannot see how these changes could possibly go ahead when it's actually impacting us in our homes where we live. We have families that need to be able to access Wellington, and cars are a solution. The bus system is not reliable. This morning, 14 buses were cancelled, 8 yesterday alone. This is consistent over the 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any questions?
There isn't any time for questions, but we have had a very full explanation from you, which is useful for our
Thank you.
thinking. Thank you. Ingrid. Do we have Ingrid? Thank you.
From Darren.
Oh, he's not.
Did we hear from Darren?
Apparently, he's no longer coming.
Morena. Ko Ingrid Downey toko ingoa. Thank you for the opportunity for me to speak on Dwell Housing Trust's proposal today. I apologize that Allison, our CE, isn't available. She's having her first post-COVID overseas trip to see her daughter, so I'm excited for her for that. Dwell Housing Trust has for over 40 years of strong commitment to being a solution to the housing crisis in Wellington City. As we know, Wellington City Council shares this commitment with a vision of all Wellingtonians well housed. Dwell Housing Trust was born in Mount Victoria through the vision of some very hardworking pioneers. And though we service the entire Wellington region now, the majority of our homes are located in the city, and all our housing developments to date have taken place in the city. Our track record is building quality medium-density homes in Newtown on Stoke Street, Berhampore in Adelaide Road, Brooklyn, Vennell Street on a property that we were able to purchase from the council, thank you. And 2 years ago, our first development in Kilburnie on Mohora Street. Together, this has achieved 28 homes with a total of 70 bedrooms used to meet the housing needs of the community. So we are developers, and we have been since 2009, but developers that build homes that are held by our charitable trust and made available to those in need. This includes individuals, for example, being supported by Aromai, Housing First, and families currently living in motels. Investment in Dwell is investment in our most vulnerable. This makes us very different from the vast majority of builders and developers that build homes because we are holding them as our charitable trust and making them available, Our focus is on quality and appropriateness as we hold these homes for the long term and house a very special population within them. So over the last 3 years, we were able to purchase 3 parcels in Kilburnie on Coots, Mohora, and Onipu Road behind the Pack and Save, and are busy working with a great team to build 29 additional new homes that will also have the location of the new Dwell office, a community room along the Onipu Street front, and a community garden in the center of the T-shaped complex. So this is the development we were asking the remission of our development contribution for. And I would love to offer anyone a tour of the site. It's very exciting. And we have plans for more. We own property in Newtown, and this is next on our development list. So please know that every penny we save in our current project will be going to our Newtown project. And we do have quite a goal of fundraising for that project because we have indications that we can build another 40 to 50 homes on that site. So in summary, your support today for the full waiver of our development contribution in Kilburnie will help us immensely in continuing to be developers of quality community homes. With this action, you join with many supporters of Dwell Housing Trust who have invested in our purpose and donated money, goods, services, and/or sweat equity to help us build new homes and be great landlords. Thank you for standing with the community and supporting community housing.
Thank you, Ingrid. We do have some time for questions, so do we have any questions? I think Ben had actually signalled first and then Diane.
Sure. Thanks, Ingrid. Are you able to tell me what your average tenancy length is, just for me to do some back of the math calculations?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Not being on the tenancy side, I don't really have access to that, but I know that we have some very long-term residents, and And yet we have some great stories of turnover of people changing their lives and moving out after a few years. So I can get you that information, but I don't have that on the top of my head. We do allow people to stay for as long as they need to.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
So Dwell's a CHIP, so would it be safe to say that you get majority of your funding through government, through MSD, to build and house tenants?
Over the years, we've had much government funding. The system right now is we get funding at the back end. So we have to come up with all the money in order to buy the land, pay the designers, pay those engineers. Oh my gosh, why weren't we engineers? And then we get an income-related rent that tops us up to a market rent, and we can apply, we can make a case for an operating supplement. So we're not getting a penny until we can get the code of compliance and start renting them.
And so obviously we have no budget. We have a development contributions based on, there's a calculation, the costs on the extra infrastructure required.
Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide the context. So why should Dwell be a special case as opposed to any other provider of housing?
Well, as a community housing provider, we went through a rigorous regulatory process to become that and to earn the trust of the government to be able to have this subsidy. So we're able to offer that same subsidy to house people off the social housing register. These are the people that are most of need in housing. And we know that when we house people in need, it's an investment that pays off in all areas: health, education, crime, all sorts of areas. So I would love for you to think about it as an investment in the community and in these people in need over the very long term that we hold these properties.
I'm just worried about that. So Pāenga-whāwhā does exactly the same thing. So they came to us and said, can you give us back the development contributions? I mean, how do you think we can rationalise this, or do you expect this will set a precedent for other community housing providers?
As much as I wish that there were many community housing providers developing in the Wellington city, that's really not the case. Pāenga-whāwhā has their own source of funding and their own ability to finance that CHIPs do not have. I guess I won't say much more about that. You do have to consider the precedent, but I think registered CHIPs like Dwell, again, the investment in us pays off.
Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Just on REP, so I understand you actually are a little different to Pāenga-whāwhā because there's the wraparound support and services as well. So can you just talk us through what those services would be for this particular development?
Absolutely. As more than a landlord, Dwell provides those wraparound services. We're there on site because our office is going to be there, and we're going to be able to help the tenants. We also tenant with the idea that we select tenants that are connected to services now, and we stay connected to them. As you can imagine, a landlord can't and shouldn't be doing it all, but we are a bridge to the special services that any of our tenants might need at any time. All of us can have little wobbles in life and need that moment of help, and so that's what we are the lookout for. And because we've been based in Wellington for so long, these are the services we know where they exist in the community to bring them in to help.
I actually do have a quick question myself. Last time your organisation came and asked for assistance, we did that through a grant. Is that an equally good way to do, to help you out as remitting the development contributions?
Absolutely. We find any way would be great. It was suggested that we go for the remittance this time, so that's what we've done. But if there's a more preferable way to help us, we would welcome that.
Okay. And I think we have another question from Councillor Abnaraman.
Cool. Thank you so much, actually, you guys, for doing for the last 40 years what you've been doing, and that's something the council should have been supported you in a big way. And I got an opportunity to look at the what you have in Kilbirnie. That's a great project. My question is, since you've been in that space, there are communities who've been renting for a very long time, related to his question as well. Is there any thinking in the future where you can have a where they can rent to own? Is there any ideas or is there any thinking?
That's just an excellent question. We had a shared home ownership program that we were supported by government. At the time, it was the social housing unit, that we were able to do progressive home ownership. Unfortunately, our plan was to continue that, to give people that ability to move on and move through the housing spectrum. Unfortunately, government had cut their funding, and we didn't have a big enough program to be self-supporting with that. So we had to stop that. But with the announcement recently of the $400 million in the Progressive Home Ownership Fund, we've been working very hard with government to make that work. Sadly, there are some difficulties with using that fund that have made it hard for us and a lot of others to use it. So we continue to work with Ministry of Housing and Urban Development to try to make that, and that would be absolutely our goal to do. Unfortunately, that needs a funding source that isn't quite there yet.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say we've run out of time, but thank you very much, Ingrid, that's been so appreciated. And I'll also have to hand over to Councillor McNulty for the last submitter, because I do need to leave. But thanks to everybody.
Thank you, Sarah.
Cool. Thank you, Sarah. Do we have any more submitters?
Do you want to sit
at the end of it? Yeah, I'll come to you. Sorry. Kia ora. Okay. All right, kia ora, Kim. Welcome, and you have 5 minutes on the clock.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Kim. I'm here to quickly talk to you about reference number T45-23. That's the change to the P10 parking on Hawker Street. So it's a pretty small change, but I'll just quickly run you through why it is important to me. I am the submitter of the request, and this request is specific to the running of Crossways Community Creche. It's an early childhood centre that operates out of Victoria in a heritage cottage on the corner of Hawker and Marjorie Banks. I have 2 young boys that go to Crossways. I'm one of the parents to help run this organisation. We're a parent-led organisation. And I'm also the submitter of the recently granted resource consent change of conditions through the council to extend our daily operating hours. So previously we were only able to operate between 8:30 and 2:30 as per our resource consent. Last year, we went through the process to request to extend those hours out to between 7:30 and 5:30. In February this year, the council has accepted and approved that change. And now the last and final part of completing that is changing the P10 parking hours out the front of the creche to match the proposed new opening and closing hours. So without the P10 hours changing, there's a condition in the resource consent saying we can't operate to those new hours. So unless the P10 hours change, we can't change how long we operate on a daily basis. Very quick background, Crossways has been in operation since 1979, over 40 years. We've got what I like to think is a pretty long-standing reputation for providing quality early childhood education in the Wellington area. We currently operate 5 days a week, and we're a very inclusive and engaged creche, given the fact that we're a parent-run cooperative. This is not my job. I have a full-time job, but this is me acting on behalf of the creche in the creche's best interest to try and lengthen our hours. The reason we are looking to lengthen our hours is up until 2 to 3 years ago, operating only 6 hours a day was fine. That worked. We had a wait list. We were full, 22 kids per day. We've seen a distinct change in the needs of our families who attend and families who want to attend. I think it's getting tougher and tougher for families to send their children to part-time childcare, and our role is now starting to struggle as we see that become more and more of a problem. We have many families who come in who would like to come to Crossways, get a great feeling, get a great vibe, but then do not end up enrolling and have to go elsewhere because simply they can't afford to go to a place that only has part-time hours. So that's what led me into the process to change our resource consent conditions to extend our operating hours, which has obviously approved back in February this year. And now we're looking to make the parking changes to match that accordingly. So yeah, this is kind of the critical and last step to lengthening those hours. And not to sound too dire about the whole thing, but if we do not lengthen our hours to better meet the needs of the community, Crossways will probably struggle to remain in operation and business as costs escalate and families look for childcare arrangements that offer full-time hours. So that's me. Any questions, please?
Cool, thank you, Kim. Are there any questions for Kim? All right, we'll let you go. Thank you for your participation, Kim.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
We are going to adjourn, I'm going to say till 11:15 to give Leanne some time to work with officers on some of those technical feedback. We'll come back and we'll work with the Dwell paper. We're going to handle that in a sort of interesting way to try and get some ideas through the committee, and then we'll go into voting on what those ideas are with full feedback. So morning tea is available to the back to the public as well, and we'll be back at 11:15. reports, and the first item on the agenda for today is 2.3, Development Contributions Remission Request for 49 Coote Street and 35 Onipu Street. So no mai Nicole Tida ki te hora I te korero. Please welcome Nicole Tida to introduce the report.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor McNulty. I'll certainly take the report as read. Don't need to go through it, but perhaps just to highlight a few key things. Yeah, the amount that Dwell have in March this year, so it's the last month requested, the amount is 100,235, just to be precise on that. The policy, the development contributions policies, the 2015 version, 2015-16 version, 2022 version, provide for council to consider requests at its complete discretion in exceptional circumstances. There's exceptional circumstances isn't defined in the policy, which is why we've chosen not to make officers, we've chosen not to make a recommendation in this case. So since we've outlined there in the report, since 2016 there's been 3 DC remission requests, so just provide a bit of background in terms of how they've been handled. Probably the only other thing just to highlight is, yeah, so that amount we haven't provided for that in the budget, so just so that's, I think that was mentioned in earlier discussion, but just to mention that as well. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Okay, look, I'll just kick off and then go around the table. So I understand we, with the City Mission in the past, had a similar request and we handled that through the Environment and Accessibility Fund. Can you just explain to us how we came to a different approach on that?
It was in the regulatory meeting. Oh, sorry. There we go. It's working. It was in that it was brought to this committee, but the committee decided that a grant would be a better way forward, and asked the full committee to review it, and then it was decided in that committee. Unfortunately, I didn't go to that committee.
Any other questions, Councillor Calvert?
I appreciate that you didn't do a recommendation this time around for the reasons you outlined, but previously we have had firm recommendation from officers. What has changed in this particular instance?
Oh, I don't recall exactly. I don't think we did have a recommendation with City Mission. I think because our role as officers is to provide guidance against council's policy. We've clearly outlined that the policy provides for remission to be made in exceptional circumstances. It's really a political decision, a council decision to determine what exceptional circumstances might be, especially since exceptional circumstances aren't defined in the policy. Yeah.
So if we wanted to move this up to another to council, would officers be in a position to make some or look at possibilities of where the funding could come from other than the development contributions account?
Well, we can get further advice from finance. As I've outlined, it's not something that's been provided for in the budget. Probably the section 45 is probably key to answering the question, and that's that the granting of the remission would result in an increase in council's budgeted debt levels, as a capital revenue from development contributions is used to reduce debt as per council's revenue and financing policy. That's probably just provides a bit more clarity. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, it's interesting that you note that previously it was brought to the council. That the previous thing was brought to the council, and the agreement was to change it through to become a grant.
Yes.
Piece of support for this development. What's your advice to the committee should this committee wish to consider recommending that same approach, that is to say it shouldn't be done as an exemption but it should be done through a grant?
Sure, it's getting a bit outside of our expertise, and it's perhaps a bit of a question for Democracy Services also, but other than just to add that the reason listening to the conversation last time about why they chose a grant, it was, I suppose, to preserve the integrity of the policy, so to speak, not having a precedent where a decision be made for remittance that could be drawn upon in the future, that a grant would be a separate process and it would be provided for through that. But yeah, democracy services representatives might want to expand, or Siobhan.
Yeah, I might just add, we don't know what the situation is with grants in terms of the balances on the grants and whether there is money that could be drawn down and taken out of one grant and given to this. So that piece of work would have to be done in the middle.
Yes, so equally, if this goes ahead, you're not sure where that funding will be coming from either. So really, that's not really a change of situation. It's more of a process thing. And so would in terms of helping preserve the budget integrity, is the grants process a wee bit better and more explicit about tying the funding implications of supporting this proposal with the actual proposal itself?
Yeah, I think it's just a cleaner way of being able to explain the movement of the money.
Are there any other questions? All right, I've got one from myself. Do you know what the impact of if we do delay on this paper would be for Dwell in terms of their certificate of compliance?
I know they were wanting to get it very, very quickly, so it would delay them. It would delay the CCC unless we allowed a postponement of DC payment. So we could, I guess you could go that way and go, we would release the CCC and sort out DCs afterwards.
I think in terms of the timeframes for them, this request came real close to the closure of this committee agenda, and there was conversation about it going to the May Regs committee. And Ingrid said, well, it really is a bit late for us because Nicole and I both had conversations with her on the phone. She said it's really a bit late for us. That around about that week is when they're looking for their tenants to move in, and it would delay that process. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. No more questions for officers? All right, thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
And Lydia. Nicole, sorry. Okay. Before we move, so I've talked to Sean about how do we do this paper in a way that we just pull out, firstly, what the feeling is of the members of the committee, and then move that into a format that we can debate and that councillors not of the committee could also input, given that this decision is a decision for members of the committee. So we're going to move this paper in two sections. We're going to initially I'll move the paper and we will go into debate on the recommendations that are listed up there, 1 to 4. And this is essentially, let's call it a placeholder debate. And this, anyone of the committee that wants to bring up their preferred action or course of action of what they think we should do, please do so. Please speak to what they think. When everyone has had a chance to speak, we will then vote on that as is. We will adjourn, and we will then take the options. I don't know if there will be unanimity on this. I'm assuming there probably won't be. So we will take options from that, and then we will add a 5 to the paper, or add a new 1 to the paper of what those options explored in the first debate are, and then we will go into full debate, and everyone will be welcome to put their 2 cents in about what we should do and wide implications. So a little bit weird. It's just a standing orders thing where we don't have a specific way of just being able to say, hey, let's have a chat on this for 10 minutes. So we have to work within the rules of council. So with that, I will move the paper, and do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Duderman. I won't speak for now, so I'll ask, is there any debate in terms of how we should proceed with handling these contributions? Councillor Calvert.
I note the officers said that this came to them quite late, so they probably didn't have enough time to do a full analysis of perhaps other options to consider, or how this council may consider that in light of any other development contributions, waiver or grants given. So I think we should be enabling the officers to have some more time. It's not through their own fault that they haven't had enough time. They've just tried to help the applicant. So I think, but I think we must make sure that we follow a fair process to not only past requesters of development contributions exemptions, because I didn't sit on the regulatory process last term, but I did the first term, and I know we turned down quite a few where they try, because basically it was against the it wasn't allowed for in the policy. And so I would much prefer that this went to a full, to the full council to consider, but then enabling the officers more time to perhaps pull something together in terms of where, if we wanted to make a separate grant in some way, where that might well come from and how that might well be funded, because probably like Dwell, we are also facing financial challenges as well.
Cool. So if I summarise that as refer to full council to consider, would that be a fair summation?
To consider, and with officers providing further advice on other avenues of funding. There might be a more eloquent way of saying that, but basically that's it.
Cool. Excellent. Is there any other debate? I'll start with the members of the committee and then come through. Pāenga-whāwhā.
Yeah, kia ora. I've listened carefully to the discussion with the questions around the remission of the development contributions, and I sort of feel we do have the discretion to. Well, I'm in favour of full remission. I mean, I think if we step back and look strategically at what we're trying to achieve in the city, it is around providing more homes, affordable homes, and appropriate accommodation for those most in need. So despite what the policy might say, I just feel that the request from a social housing provider for remission of their contributions should be granted as a matter of policy. And I'm not entirely clear whether that's consistent with the current policy or not, but strategically it makes perfect sense. Just around the comment about setting a precedent, I'm not convinced there's a huge amount of social housing providers working in the city, so I don't feel it will create a huge precedent, and even if it does, for those small number of social housing providers, surely that's a precedent we want. We want more affordable homes for those most in need.
Cool, thank you. So that's full remission. I'll just leave it at that one. I know Councillor Paul's tangi's probably started now, but just Mea Whānau or Councillor Paul, do you have any contribution? Just want to double check. Okay, all right, I'll take that as no. All right, just since you're in the room, is there any, your preferred, Councillor Abdulrahman?
Yeah, I do support the full remission.
Okay, full remission. And Councillor Randall, noting you're not, sorry.
Cool. I think I had the opportunity to look at the Kilbirnie one, and I also had a few of them in Newtown and Berhampur. They are doing an amazing job. This is the kind of communities that we need to be supporting. And one thing I would like to remind myself and all other committee members as well, it is in our strategic and action plan. We have commitment in every part of the housing continuum, including temporary housing, short and long-term rental, and home ownership. We support housing system that looks after our most vulnerable. This organization, they are exactly doing that. And this is very little that we can do in supporting them. When it comes to setting precedents, I think that's one, is not how council works. Secondly, let it be. We should be supporting any community organization that is supporting the most vulnerable. They are not doing like the rest for commercial purposes, and they've been doing this for 40 years, and I think they need to be supported.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Abdulrahman. Councillor Randall, noting you're not a member of the committee, but we'll still welcome, some thoughts to be shared.
Thank you. So for me, the issue of full or part remission is not the point. It's a matter of process. And when it comes to precedent, I get the sense, in fact, what we're doing is potentially changing precedent. We have a process which has been used several times through the grants approach, by which full remission sometimes has been given to developers. And this is another method to give the same outcome. But I am very concerned that this method is not very clearly tied to the budgeting process. we essentially can grant this proposal, but then we leave ourselves and officers unclear about where the money is going to go and what potentially is not going to happen because of this initiative. And I think we've already got an established process. I'm particularly concerned because this is obviously time urgent for the applicant. This is why potentially it's come through this process. I mean, this could have been just the next committee that could have given this, but I'm concerned at changing precedent on something where officers haven't had a chance potentially to think all the way through this. And so I know it may hurt the applicant's initiative, and I certainly support what they do, but I think we need officers to give officers a little more time, and we have a process. And so I would recommend that, as the previous committee has done, that we reject this proposal as a method as the way in which we consider this remission request, and send it off to the process that has been used in the past. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Randall and Councillor Young.
Thank you. So I've been out there to have a look at the Kilbirnie properties, and they're terrific. So no doubt about the fact that they do a great job. I am concerned that when we talk about the most vulnerable citizens, that we're in danger of making our ratepayers the most vulnerable because of all the costs we're putting on the ratepayers. But I do think this is a really, really good cause, and I just think we need to find another way to skin this rabbit so that we don't touch the development contributions, but we do it through another way. I'm sure we can find another way.
Cool, thank you.
Even though I'm worried about the ratepayers.
Alrighty, so, and I'll share Councillor Free's comment. She's texted me since she's headed off. So she was leaning no towards something partial, but I guess I haven't really heard that there's anything in the middle. It sort of seems like we either defer this in terms of a different process, or the ends justify the means, maybe is the one way of summarise it, but the good is to be done now. So what I will do, okay, Councillor Calvert, I'll pass to you again. I feel I've relayed it, but you also share it because this is a decision of our committee, and she isn't here. So
she says that in her strong view is that I wouldn't support remitting the development contributions for Dwell. Reasons given: expenses rising, interest rates apply to our costs as well, and this will set a precedent. Would prefer to deal with it through a grant or through policy change at the LTP. Cool. So that was her words. And is the Mayor and Councillor Paul actually online, or have we got a quorum?
Yep, they're on.
Yeah, but are they actually there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm online.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. And I know Councillor Paul's tangi started at 11 a.m, so I believe she's listening in, but also in a personally difficult circumstance. So, all right, well, in that, we will just vote to take the recommendations as now. So this is just letting us move into the next stage. We're not voting for a course of action specific. We will adjourn for just 5 minutes for us to then draft up the 2 courses of action that have come through this, and then we'll return for a debate on whether essentially we will remit in full or whether we will refer this into council to be looked at. So if we, I'm not going to, we've done debate. Technically, myself and Councillor Abdurrahman have a right of reply. I'm not going to, can I say it? No, okay. So I'll put the motion which has been moved and seconded to the vote. Those in favour press 1 and those against please press 2.
You're saying we're taking one part. What's the next part?
So we're going to then adjourn, and we're going to add a new number 1, which will be basically whether do we refer or whether we put into full council. So I know this is a little uncouth. It's because the standing orders don't give us the discretion to have a discussion where we can put our ideas on the table. So all we're doing right now is voting on what has been put in the paper that has no course of action, but that will let us move into the next stage where we can then have a discussion and a debate on what we do from there. And I assume Tam's probably unavailable. Okay, let's take a 5-minute adjournment. So 11:40 we'll resume, and we'll come back with something we've pulled out of this discussion. So we have to go with one or the other here. So what we've put up is firstly a debate on agreeing to the full remission. If that fails, we will then go into a debate to, instead of agree to the full remission of 100,235, we will go to direct officers to investigate alternative sources of funding to enable full remission and bring it back to council for a decision. So, sorry, Councillor Calvert.
Could I not move that as an amendment before you go into making that thing? If somebody would second it?
You could, I think the problem is the seconder. Sarah would definitely do it if she was here.
So no one would second that then, I take it?
I'm personally leaning on the other side, so I think that's a problem. That's why I've started here. I would rather start with what you've put forward, to be honest, but I don't think we have a seconder on it at this stage. All right. So do I need to move this again now? Okay. All right. So I'm going to move now the new motion that we agree to the full remission of $100,235. Councillor Abdurrahmani still happy to second on that. Is there any debate? This is the chance to say whether we should do this or not. Councillor Randall.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up on the questioning that was outlined. I don't think this is a good idea. I think it sets a precedent. I think the officers, it puts the officers in a more difficult position because then we're making essentially an indirect commitment of ratepayer funds without actually identifying the source of where that funding is to come from, which I don't think is a good way to do this. And we have an established process which ties everything together neatly. And so I think on the basis that on that basis, I recommend against agreeing this, and I think I urge people to vote against it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Chung.
Similar to Councillor Randall, I like to have things in financial issues. I like to have things quite clear. I like to know what the full budgets are for any particular thing, and so that when you start making exceptions and taking things out, it actually changes the whole financial budget systems that the council works on. So when they come up with a particular figure, say we use this much, or that we expect this much to come in on development contributions, we expect this much on the grants committee. I would much prefer this sort of application to actually go to the grants committee to give them that money that way rather than making exceptions. Otherwise, it's going to be a never-ending thing. We're going to be making exceptions for all our particular rules, which makes our rules a bit of a farce. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other debate? Yeah, Councillor Calvert.
I mean, I've basically already spoken to this, but I'm really disappointed that we can just give money away without thinking about where it's coming from. Whilst we've got policies and strategies in place, it's not a never-ending bucket of money. So I hope those ones who are supporting this will think about when we are signing off on our 23-24 budget, ensuring that we have a realistic budget and we think about how we're going to fund another 100K, which we're going to have to borrow money on for 6% or so. So this is going to cost us money. So and not taking out of any housing budget, so that we already have or might have. So I'm supportive of us looking at other opportunities of other buckets of money that we might well have, but certainly not setting of what I think is a very dangerous precedent, or basically making policy on the fly in terms of how we interpret our development contributions policy. So I won't be supporting this.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other debate? I'll speak to it then. Look, I suppose tried to design this process for thinking there might be a little bit of a middle ground in the back of my head, but it looks like we're going all in or nothing today. And for me, if the precedent we're setting is that we have a stream of social housing providers knocking on the door of Wellington City Council because we have too much social housing being built in the city, it sits with me relatively comfortably. Perhaps not helpful now that I realise it. Having talked to Councillor Paul early in the week, my understanding is that the E&I committee will be looking at developer contributions and a particular possible waiver of all developer contributions in regards to social housing across the city. So there is a piece of work, I suppose, coming up in the near future that is going to set policy around this anyway. So in terms of whether we set the precedent today and it's still there in 2, 3, 5 years' time, I don't think that's going to be the case because this paper will come up ahead of us. For me, it's the fact that we have on-site support provided in this housing. These are such vulnerable people, and we are going to do something that is beyond what most other social housing providers do. They were recognised last week with Alison winning a Wally Award for the work that she has done in the community. And for me, understanding that this 100K would be directly invested into Newtown, where we're looking at even almost a scale of double the size, that is a compelling argument through to me. So in this basis, I am happy to support. So I will sorry, do I need to go to Nuridan for a seconder? Or, no, you didn't. You declined to speak. So I'll put the motion, which has been moved and seconded, to the vote. Those in favour, please press 1, and those against, please press 2.
Could I have a division, please?
Division.
There's not one already. Thank you.
Just means we record everyone's vote. Yeah. I think that's okay to close now because Tam's... Okay. And that, I declare the motion carried. We will move on to 2.1, traffic resolutions. Please welcome Wendy Ferguson to introduce the report.
I'll introduce it.
Siobhan Proctor.
Great pleasure to introduce the traffic resolution report. We went out for consultation on 29 resolutions. We have got decisions to make on 28 of them today. Broad support across most of them, although you've heard from submitters on a range of submissions on a few of the more contentious ones. So happy to welcome Suntek Kong and Zach Moody to answer any questions.
I'm sure we have a lot of questions based on that public feedback from this morning, so I'll start taking a speaking list. Councillor Calvert.
Can you tell me, I know you spoke with some of the residents from the public participants, so has your view changed on any of the resolutions in front of us? And I'm thinking namely Donald Crescent and maybe Ottawa and John Sims?
Yes, I've spoken with some of the resident for Ottawa Road, Leanne, and we have kind of discussed a potential change in the options, but I would much prefer to speak with Metlink just to confirm the change in the locations, as our compromise position would be having the bus stops marked directly opposite each other. We usually kind of prefer a bit of a stagger.
So does that mean that you may be putting this one on hold, or are you expecting a decision from us today on it?
Yeah, I'd recommend to defer until further notice, or whether or not we can make a decision based on the feedback from Metlink.
Okay. When would you expect that feedback from Metlink?
Probably by tomorrow.
All right.
Oh, wait.
So okay. All right. So I think I'll leave that just with officers where they, and any after hearing the public participants, Donald Crescent, I understood. Is it true that both sides were wanting to just defer until they can, or have I got? I'm not sure whether I've got that right or not.
As officers, we will be recommending to go ahead with the traffic resolution because there's safety concerns and also the issues that needs to be mitigated now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Abdurrahman. Oh, okay, excellent. Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much. You've just reminded me, and I didn't have time for we didn't have time for questions before. When Andrew spoke regarding the John Sims proposal to put the bus lanes in, because the two bus stops, the one going clockwise and anti-clockwise, they are almost opposite each other. And of course, this exacerbates the problem of parking, because of course you're taking parking away from both sides right at that point. So would it be a consideration to ask the Greater Wellington Regional Council, or Metlink, sorry, to actually relocate the uphill bus stop so that they can reinstate the parking opposite there? Is that an option?
It is an option, but it's the same issue with putting outside someone else's property where there's currently no bus stop. There's an existing bus stop at this location. We just want to formalise it with the appropriate marking. Shifting the bus stop and trying to put it outside someone else's property has always come back with a lot more against it.
It just needs, Councillor Chung, it just needs a new traffic resolution to be consulted with the affected neighbours.
Okay. So just one last question on that. When you have the bus, I think it's 6 metres, is it, for a bus stop? And so you have a taper in and taper out. So is it possible to actually locate the taper and taper outs over a driveway so that it doesn't remove any car parks?
Yes, that's what we typically try to do, is to have the entry or exit taper over existing driveways to make use of the existing no parking over driveways. So we try to reduce the amount of parking lost. But yeah, it's a 15-metre bus box with a 9-metre exit taper and usually a 15-metre entry taper.
Thank you. A few of my own that came through. There was talk in Donald Crescent about illegal yellow lines having been painted by a resident. Were you aware of that, or has any action come off that?
From historical street view, there are a few broken lines in there that there aren't any solid evidence. Obviously, something back from 1990 is a bit difficult to justify whether or not they're legal. I had a look in our RAM database, and it's kind of conflicts with the what's on site. If you have a look at the historical street view back in 2008, those existing ones right in the cul-de-sac, there's actually a lot more. And from a reseal of the road, it looks like only 3 yellow lines were put back in.
Okay. And there was a question about removal of yellow lines. Does it actually happen once they're in? Can you
Yes, it does. But I wouldn't know how often, but I have removed broken lines before.
Okay. And moving over to Ottawa. So is parking already illegal because the bus stop's there, but it's not formalised in the car parks that they're concerned of losing?
The road user rules stipulates that within 6 metres of the bus stop sign, you shouldn't be parking, so either 6 metres either side. Okay. So that existing owl bar outside number 14, technically that is within that 6 metres, but obviously it's historical marking back in the day. Can't really justify it now, kind of thing.
So we haven't taken enforcement action on that previously, even though we technically could?
The warden's still kind of put in a discretion regards to taping. So they see the owl bar, it's within 6 metres, it's kind of over some driveways, it's low volume-ish area. They'd kind of just either pass it on to us to consider appropriate marking so they can properly enforce it.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Abdurrahman.
Cool. Thank you, Chairman. My question would be regards to the Brooklyn one on Karepa Street, where submitters were saying that they got more time. The deadline was on 15, and then there was an extension for 4 days. Am I right?
Do you know about
that? Councillor, yes, we extended the deadline for them to submit on that.
So how practical it is for them to respond in that 4 days, and what that mean after you review? Did you send to all residents of the area or just only to those who submitted against it?
This traffic resolution was approved previously. We just make amendments to it, and those that are affected were given the chance to revisit their views.
So you mean to all the residents that you previously communicated, or only to those who responded?
Those that responded.
So does that mean those who might be deemed to understand an understanding of an approval, saying that, oh, this is good, I'm not going to be submitting, after you review, they might have something to say? How do you consider that?
The consideration we make is whatever change we make directly affected resident. So if we extend the broken yellow lines, we would consult with the affected residents.
So in general, is that fair enough to say residents have got enough time to discuss amongst each other to sort out the parkings, even when we're going to make hard decisions here? So they got enough time. Is that fair enough to say?
we have given them the first opportunity, and after we have amended the plans, we gave the affected neighbours another chance to comment on what changes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Councillor Randall.
Thank you. I have a few to go through. Respect to TR 47 on Elliott Street, you're adding yellow lines for safety issues, but in terms of the submitters outlining that you're reducing access to a kindergarten, was the increased distance that parents with very young children would have to travel taken into consideration as part of the safety assessment of whether or not this should go ahead?
Yeah, we do consider all kind of options, but at the end of the day, the road user rule is that you shouldn't be parking close or near an intersection. Technically, the other side is still part of the intersection with the additional of driveways and everything. It's kind of, and having people enter and exit vehicles at an intersection close to kinder, even a whole bunch of properties, there would probably be more concern than someone parking further away where it's safe to do so than walking the distance.
Okay. With respect to Donald Crescent, first of all, you know, it was outlined that there's been liaison with the teams that trim the trees and that sort of stuff. That you haven't heard back from them, because there was an assertion that trimming the trees back or doing some work around that space would actually give adequate space for enabling cars to park without. And still provide adequate width for emergency vehicles. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we do have a response back from the arborist team, and they do have that site as part of their job as low priority, and it sounds like they have tried to attend site, but with vehicles parked in that spot, they can't just trim the trees on top of cars. So
yeah, so you know, surely you're wanting to proceed ahead on the basis that it's a safety issue, an urgent safety issue, but the tree, you know, the alternative solution, which is for the arborist team to go put up some road cones and then turn up and trim some trees, is actually low priority. Is that correct?
The trimming the trees is just, we're not removing all the parking. Like, people still shouldn't be parking on the grass area of the roots of those trees. Adding the broken lines will kind of help reassure that. We do sometimes, when we issue the jobs out to get broken lines installed, our team does sometimes have to return it multiple times, and if they can't get to it, then they do ask us to help assist with either notifying the resident, ask them to not park there, or put some cones out.
Okay, so one of the submitters said that that's actually not the law. Is that correct?
Not the law to...
Well, that you can park on the berm so long as you don't disrupt the green space and such like that.
It is a bit of a grey line, but like you're parking on the roots of a tree. Like, is it or is it not damaging the tree roots and the health of the trees? It's,
So we're still putting in these yellow lines to stop parking outside trees, stop them damaging these roots.
Not just that, but also the width of that space. There's, I think it's about, from the records, about 6 metres. Typically, if we're allowing parking both sides of the road, we'd want at least 6.9 to allow 2 metres of parking and 2.9 metres carriageway width.
Yeah, I know, ideal, but we are in Wellington City.
Sorry, I can't let you butt in, but I'll suggest Councillor Randall might come up and have a chat with you when he's done with his questions.
Yeah, sure. So, is it also true there's no curb there, so the seal could have been widened?
Yes, we usually reseal to the existing seal spot. Obviously, if we seal more, then we're sealing on top of roots.
Yeah, so one of the submitters said that was you sealed less last time. So, you know, if you sealed to what the chip seal was before, I understand that would have been adequate width. Is that correct?
I can't comment on that. I don't know the exact extent of the previous and new seal. All I can really go off is historical street views.
Okay. So I've got a few more questions, but I'll stop there and come back because other people.
Go talk to the public participant, and I'll move into questions quickly for myself, and then Councillor Calvert.
Councillor Randall, just to add about parking on the berm, I think it needs to have council's approval to allow parking on the berm. So we need to be able to sign it if we are proposing parking on the berm.
Cool. So just a question from me, and we'll start to wrap up. So my understanding with Donald Crescent was the key issue was actually the mobility of rubbish services in the pre-briefing that we had, that trucks were getting to the end, unable to turn around, and it was creating some hazards around that, but it hasn't necessarily come through that strongly today. Is that the case, or can you just talk a bit more to the genesis of this proposal?
Obviously, we wouldn't be proposing this unless someone's inquired or they witnessed a situation like that and brought it to our attention. Obviously, there's a lot of instances that just don't go notified. The garbage truck guys, they just do what they can. The situation, if they obviously can't reach a huge section of the street, they'll report it to us. But if it was just this last end, they'd probably just walk the last couple of metres.
Yep. Okay. Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, just to note, there's a quite a large number of these traffic resolutions. I did a quick count. I think roughly 28. There might be one or two either way. Which is really unusual to see that many. So I'm interested to understand whether, and they've all come to just this one meeting, so I'm interested to understand whether you feel that you've got enough resource to do the necessary engagement with local residents and to be able to go backwards and forwards a little bit to try and find a compromise. Because there's a lot of work there just from an engineering perspective. So just really...
I can answer that Councillor Calvert. So we deliberately resourced up the transport team probably 3 years ago, brought in some engineering assistance because we really wanted to provide a better customer service. So most of these traffic resolutions will be as a result of residents' requests or working with Metlink to improve the bus system. So I'm satisfied that there's sufficient resource. I know they're under pressure and it's always a battle to actually recruit. But we deliberately did this so we could bring more traffic resolutions and get more changes across the city to improve safety and accessibility and efficiency and all of those things.
Thank you.
Councillor Chung?
Yes. Didn't we just have a resolution some time ago about parking on berms that originally we used to allow cars to park on the berm, then just recently, I seem to remember about a month or two ago, we said that we would start enforcing parking on there. So what are we doing now? We're going back and saying that it is or not permissible?
That recent one was more regards to footpath parking. So there was a legacy allowance to park on the footpath as long as there's 1 metre, but as part of our council's new direction, we're removing that ability because over the time it's just been abused, and we want to focus on allowing pedestrians and all other modes better access on our footpaths.
Great, that's good, thanks. Now, just confirming, what's the difference between a berm where people walk and having a footpath? Is a footpath defined by being sealed in asphalt, or is it,
yes.
How is it?
So a berm is the grass area behind the curb.
Councillor Randall?
Yes, so I've consulted the member of the public. I hate to contradict you, but is in the law that in fact your person's not allowed to park on the road if they can park on the berm, and that's section 6.2 of the Act, and it actually only applies if you put up signs saying you can't do it. So actually, it seems. So I just want to put it on the table. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just thinking that I think there's the grey area is not that grey. It seems to me in the law. So in terms of the supporters and such like, I just want to ask again, I guess, is it possible, given both the supporters and the opponents of the change who came here, and a considerable number did come here, And obviously, it's an important thing, but they both want to put it on hold. I just wanted to ask whether or not you'd, based on that feedback of people who turned up, and given that the choke point and considerations for a reasonably short dead-end road, it's not like we're talking about a choke point on an arterial road, whether or not it'd be possible to perhaps put this on hold?
Yes, we can put it on hold and have a further discussions with the residents.
That's cool.
Just regards to the parking off the vehicle area, that's why it's kind of a grey area. Like if you're parking on the grass or roots or everything, like who's to say, like, is that or is that not damaging the grass or the berms? Like I've seen many situations where vehicles have parked in the grass area and now it's just like a muddy, rutted kind of area.
Yeah, I know, and I don't want to get into detail. I mean, apparently they're macacarpus, they're not natives, they're going to get removed, they're dying, they're going to be replaced. There's a whole other thing. We've got a very active local community, so I'm pleased that you guys can go back and talk to them some more and come up with a good solution on that space. I think that's the best solution. Thanks. In terms of further questions.
Councillor Brenda, just a clarification. Are you talking about the whole traffic resolution or just that section of broken yellow lines? Because that whole turning area is needed because you can see cars parking over the footpath and we are trying to promote walking, and that is a different issue than parking on the berm.
I'm just looking at the whole traffic resolution because I think you've got a very active community there who are wanting to engage and who are wanting to come to a good solution.
Councillor Randall, can I just, so the option to defer is an option for council to make. I don't think officers are supporting that in this instance. Just in terms of around parking on a berm, our traffic bylaw actually prohibits parking on a berm. So we have a traffic bylaw. So no person may stop, stand or park a vehicle on a berm, verge, curb, lawn, garden or any other cultivation adjacent to or forming part of the road. So that's covered in our traffic bylaw.
Cool. All right, any further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Vaughan, although I just note that the law says we have to put up signs to enforce it. In terms of traffic resolution number, so last bit's it, but the bus lanes, that's traffic resolution 1823. I raised an issue. We're looking at 24-hour bus lanes. Can you outline the evidence that buses are being delayed outside peak times by the fact that there are cars parked along there and that the bus lane's not continuous at that time?
We're just going to invite Vita Christella to come and talk to that.
Cool. Yeah.
Kia ora. Yes, so there on the 15th of September last year, there was a traffic resolution that was for the whole of the project, just Newtown to City. And on that, there's some detail gone into in terms of the delays. So when we're looking at that, I'm just looking at paragraph 40 in that. It says that full-time bus lanes would result in around double the benefits, 152 hours of travel time savings a day for bus users, compared with about 78 hours per day for weekday peak hours only. So at the moment, we would be saving with full-time about, I can't do that maths, but around 70 hours of delays.
Not quite sure what that means in reality. It's a very
and I guess I can add to that in the bus priority action plan. There is also, I think there's 1 to 2 minute improvements will happen with doing these improvements. So you'll be able to see in the bus priority action plan there's a graph, and on that graph there is delays throughout the whole day on that.
Well, yeah, there was. I mean, there's delays, but I'm not sure. In terms of where the need for this service comes, we've got a bus service that's actually not able to take people in terms that their buses are full.
Question, Councillor Randall.
So the question I have is has it been taken into account the fact that dozens of peak hour buses are not able to take people in, and so many people are forced to drive into town, and this will remove car parks along a major part of the CBD. And so people like in Ōtautahi might be faced with not being able to get on a bus and not being able to drive if they want to visit the services near there.
Yeah. So currently we've had some up-to-date data from Metlink, which was in the Q&A, which was sent out last night. So there's around 450 buses just under 450 buses in each direction each day, and they're spread throughout the whole day. In peak hours, every half hour, there's around 20 to 30, and during the day, it's still up at around between 10 and 15 buses per half hour. And Metlink have said that this will be a significant improvement for bus delays along this corridor.
Yeah, with all due respect, that's not really answering my question, which is what do people do if they can't get on a bus at peak time and there's no parks
I think that's out of the scope of officers to be able to talk about, just in terms of a traffic resolution of we're doing through. There's 30 resolutions here, so I want to make sure there is a good time for Q&A here, but I'm also conscious that we do need to move on. So one question each is allowed for, if wanted. I've got Councillor Duraman next. No, you're free. Councillor Young.
So I got distracted by a slight domestic crisis. I can't understand why we have the need for 24-hour bus lanes when we don't have 24-hour buses. I mean, you gave me the Metlink figures for during the day, but during nighttime, I mean, why are we doing that?
So the 24 has been proposed, and the traffic management plan that was done in relation to the project showed that there was there was enough parking to deal with the peak times. It was also showing that the peak time towards Courtney Place was in the evening, but could be covered by the parking that remained.
But I'm not talking about the parking. It just seems to me to be nuts to have an area which is verboten to everybody when there are no buses, because I don't know what time the last bus goes, because I don't live out that way, but it won't be much later than 11 o'clock. So you've got from, say, 11 till, 5:30 in the morning. And, that's not a time when I'm out partying anymore, but I know lots of people do.
Yeah.
It just seems to me to be unnecessarily stringent. And we have had areas before. I mean, I remember in Kelburn they had permanent bus lane, bus park thing. We got that changed because it was only used during certain hours.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better to have the bus lane just for the times when there actually is a bus service, assuming that there is a bus service? Because at the moment we know it's a bit patchy.
That could be an option.
Okay. So in terms of that being an option, if we were to take the resolution today and vote that through, that could be raised by councillors to then re-review. How's that best worked through process-wise?
Councillors, we can amend the traffic resolution now by reducing the hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Spoken to Metlink about this, and the minimum, like what they've said is a 7 to 7 would also cover the majority of their range of time.
So I'm kind of hesitant on doing this on the fly, but if there's a clear view from officers of how that could work outside of those hours, I think there's probably a good compromise to be reached there. Do we need to take a little adjournment just to work that through, and then we can come back and move the paper in? Okay, we'll do that. We'll take 5 minutes, 12:20. that has been a good collaborative break, and there's a few wins in there, so that's really positive to see. So I will, with that, thank the officers for their time today. That's quite a lot of questions, but I appreciate the volume of traffic resolutions, your time and help today, so thank you. I'll move the traffic resolutions paper today. And is there a seconder for this paper? Okay, Councillor Baduraman. I need to speak to this as I'm moving it. So pretty self-explanatory. We are looking at 29 traffic resolutions across the city in varying levels of complexity. Seems like there's been a good job done here, in my opinion, in terms of getting public engagement out. I think we've heard that clearly today in the participation, and having read through all the submissions over my last Friday night, because that's the life of a city councillor, I do appreciate all the residents that have taken time, especially there are submissions in there that you can tell have taken hours of work, and I think that should be recognised when residents are that passionate. So with that, I will move into, is there any debate on this paper? Okay, Councillor Calvert.
Oh, I think it's worth just saying something, because I do appreciate the officers have put a lot of work into this on the 28 or so. So thank you. It's never easy appeasing everyone, but I do think that there would have been an opportunity to work, just to go back to the Donald Crescent folk and see whether there could have been some other amendments done there. So I would have preferred that to have laid on the table, but it's not, so we'll vote accordingly on that one. And also for the John Sims one in Broadmeadows, I think that should have just been left as it is for a number of reasons, but I won't, but at the end of the day, the officers have done the work, and I thank you for that. So I'll vote accordingly when we take them separately.
Thank you, Councillor Calvert. Councillor Abdurrahman, do you want your right of reply?
Cool, thank you so much. I think what I would like to say is I had an opportunity to speak to the community, because this is a big deal, and I read through the submissions, and some of the communities, they are losing parking, so I wanted to make sure if what we're doing is the right thing. So I went to Karipa Street, I was standing outside and speaking to the community, and it's really interesting to find out how they feel about it. And I want to give an example of Jason, a tradie who was working in one of the houses in that place. He'd been working there for 8 weeks. And he told me how dangerous it was for him to drive around. And he really said this is something that the community needed. I also spoke to another people who were walking around, two friends. One is Manor, who was working with his daughter Pribata, and they've been living for decades in Brooklyn, in that area. And they don't feel safe when they walk on that road. And they started the discussion back in 2018 and 19, and the council, they said actually they should have done it a long time ago. So this is something they really supported. And I parked my car outside of one of the houses, and I was looking at how dangerous it is. And actually I was just kind of shocked for how long it has been there, nothing has happened. My only comment would be, it should go even by putting more pedestrians walking instead of just, even if we are moving some of the car parks now, pedestrians are walking on the road. Still, there is no pedestrians walking spaces. So I think we need to do more. And the other two in Adelaide Road, again, it's not a big one. I think it's supported by the community, and we need a bus stop in that area. And that's very dangerous where it was before. A lot of car park has been parked. It's currently a temporary one. And the third one is that I would like to speak to is on Owen Street, where it's a kindy in front of, just we are not moving even much, and we're just making it the time when it's dropping and picking up. The families can have easily access to pick their children. This is a kindy, so that's something really makes sense for me. And the fourth one is on Daniel Street. Again, St. Anne and also Newtown School. They've been requesting for this for a very long time, and it was not very safe. It was no parking. They have to double park to pick their kids. And I really appreciate the officers putting those things forward, and I'm supporting this. I encourage all of you to also support it. And in regards to some of the other one, I feel really sad to some of the community who are losing their car parks, and it's sad. But however, when it's comparison to the safety of the children of the community, the safety of communities who are walking on the road with their dogs, with their families, the elderly, I think that is something that we need to be thinking when we vote about this. I'm not a road engineer. I do think a lot of councillors are not as well. So we need to be getting the advice of the officers, and that's why I'm voting. I'm relying on the advice of the officers when I vote on this. I really feel the pain of the car park people will be losing in Karori, in McDonald's, and at the same time in Ottawa and Johnson Street. But I think this is the right thing to do for the community, for the safety, and I'm supporting this. And thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll just take a chance to tie up a few remarks. So firstly, I want to thank councillors and committee members that have gone out and met with people and had a view of these ones. I think we build a bit more trust of the community, even if they might not like the decisions, when we're at least seen to engage with them in these decisions. And I share Councillor Abdurrahman's concern that parking, there's a tendency just to go, oh, well, you're losing some parks, tough, you'll bear with it. But this does have a disruptive impact on people's lives, and we should take note of the gravity of some of the decisions that we make and not treat it so flippantly as some out there may otherwise do. So I just want to take my observations from my weekend drive that are guiding my vote. So I was in Karori on Saturday and took a time up Donald Crescent. My issue was I got to the end of the cul-de-sac, and in my little Mazda 3 I had to do a very difficult three-point turn because there were vehicles parking out. So I can't imagine how a rubbish vehicle would turn around into there, and I can really empathise with, we have a shortage of drivers, and not just buses, but in garbage collection. Anything we're doing to make their jobs easier, if they are having to deal with these types of issues across bottlenecks in our city, we are inadvertently making it more difficult for the job of Enviro Waste to recruit and retain their staff. So that was something that I came through in Donald Crescent, and I did notice that every single property on there did have at least one, if not two, off-street car parks. So I do feel for, again, the gravity of what we're doing, but this didn't strike me as an area that was suffering like some areas of, say, the Hills in Kelburn, where accessibility to a single car park on the street is much more tenuous. Looking into Broadmeadows as well, again, I do feel some sympathy here. This is a legal driveway though, and it seemed to me, at least through my drive, that there was an abundance of on-street parking, and yet alone two houses that were affected that had two driveways were sufficient for two vehicles plus garaging. So on that basis, I guess in the back of my head, I'm feeling if you've got access to two vehicle parks, that's pretty comfortable in the city, given that car parks are a scarce resource and we are challenged by our topography and geography. So again, I'll just thank officers for the work that they've done here, and I'm really pleased to see that we're just able to pull out some good compromise from today and what we're doing here. What I would suggest for councillors of those that are mostly impacted, please do keep in touch with these residents, and if these things are not working, let's bring them back into council offices and let's look. Let's make sure the community knows that it's not one and done when we do some of this work here as well, and that we will be receptive if what we've decided today doesn't quite work. So with that, I'm going to put the motion that has been moved and seconded. We're going to take everything apart from, I believe, Donald Crescent and John Sims Drive. That is the first vote. So those in favour of everything except for Donald Crescent and John Sims Drive, please press 1, and those against, press 2. Okay, I declare the motion carried. We will now take, which is the first one on there? Is it John? Donald Crescent. We'll now take Donald Crescent by itself. Oh, okay, we'll take Donald Crescent and John Sims together. So for those in favour, press 1, and those against, please press 2. And I declare the motion carried. All right, we'll move on to paper 2.2, proposed road closures. No mai Maria Tuama ki te hora I te korero. Please welcome Maria Tuama to introduce the report. Kia ora. There's a bit of chatter in the back. We are still in committee, so can I please ask if you're sitting up the back to shush or just converse outside the chambers? Thank you.
Talk. So I have the Anzac Day Pukea Park road closure presented on the Tuesday the 25th.
So does anyone have any questions?
Do we have any questions for me?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Maria.
Thank you.
Straightforward. Is there a mover for this motion? Councillor Calvert, thank you. And is there a seconder for the motion? Pāenga-whāwhā, thank you. Is there any debate?
Excuse me, I have to move it.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
That's all right, that's all right. So yes, so I move the officer's recommendations, and obviously it's for Anzac Day, and these are pretty standard, and I certainly am not one to get in the way of Anzac Day commemorations.
Excellent, thank you. Pāenga, is there is there any debate now? Would you like to take your right of reply? No, okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. All right, I'll now put the motion that has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, press 1, and those against, please press 2. And I declare the motion carried. Thank you, Maria. Okay, we'll move to 2.4, a new ground lease for the Johnsonville Rugby Football Club Incorporated. So we will welcome Sanjay Patel and Parish Evans to introduce the report, though they may not be in the room currently. Do we need to do a quick adjournment, or should we reshuffle? All right, we'll do a...
Coming in now.
Oh, okay.
I'm probably keeping an eye on the updates. Just gone into warp speed.
Yeah.
There we go.
Excellent.
Brad.
All right.
We're done.
Cool. Sorry, we shot through 2.3, so no mai Sanjay Patel and Parish Evans ki te horo I te korero.
Kia ora, councillors. So today we have the Johnsonville Rugby Club lease. We are requesting one new ground lease for the existing leasee. It is a club-owned building and it's on recreation reserve land. We're requesting a 10-year lease with one right of renewal for 10 years. Johnsonville Rugby Club offers recreation opportunities and aligns with the Recreation Reserves Act. And Parish here, who is one of our lease advisors, has been working with the club over the last 6 months to gather all the lease compliance information and is happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Okay. Is there a mover for the motion? I'll move this one. Is there a seconder? Councillor Calvert, thank you. So, as you said, Johnsonville Rugby Foot Club, located in the greatest suburb of the greatest ward, as we all know and have established to be fact around the City Council. I'm more than privileged to move this paper. It's a great facility. I often hear, I live nearby in the weekends, loud, voluminous applause from the local rugby games that are going through. So, clearly a great community facility, and I believe when we talked about this in pre-briefing, there may be some work to be upgrading that facility. I know it hosts 21st and other functions, so that's great to bring even more amenity into a suburb dripping with amenity as it is. Excellent. Is there any debate on this paper? Sorry, second it.
I'm just going to say that someone who lives in Outer Johnsonville, I support this.
Excellent, thank you. Is there any debate? Okay, and take a right reply. So I will now put the motion that has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please press 1, and those against, please press 2. And I declare the motion carried. Thank you. All right, we'll take 2.5 and 2.6 together, actions, tracking and forward programs. So, Siobhan, could you please introduce the reports?
My favourite time of regs. Very happy to introduce actions tracking and forward programs. So actions tracking, we've got 43 actions still in progress. Just a note that actions on traffic resolutions, we don't actually close them off until the work's been implemented, so there can be a bit of a time delay there. Forward program, there's quite a busy forward program coming up. We've got oral hearings. I think we're up to 4 days, are we, of oral hearings? 3 days of oral hearings for Thorndon and Kilburney connections on the bike network plan. And then next month, I think we've got probably some quite contentious TRs to consider.
Excellent. Is there any questions for Siobhan before we move on to debate? So, Councillor Calvert.
I mean, we just on the forward work, given that we're going to have a lot of people coming in to talk about the traffic resolutions, but we're also in the middle of annual plan and some other major consultations. Have we got enough capacity to do that?
Yes, so they've all been booked in. So I think separating out the oral hearings for the Pāenga-whāwhā traffic resolutions means that we won't have much public participation on the day for regs next time, but there will be probably submissions from others, I'd anticipate. And it's just the nature of our work programme, which Council set for us.
Excellent. Any other questions? No. I'm happy to move this one again. Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Calvert, thank you. Would you?
I'd just like to speak to this
yeah,
as well.
I had that to let you speak this time. So, Councillor Calvert.
That's all right. Look, I just want to formally note that it is a heavy workload, and I think we need to make sure that as a council as a whole, that we actually, whilst we want to see action in certain areas or in a lot of areas, have we got the capacity to do it adequately going forward? And that's not just agreeing something, but making sure things get implemented and monitored along the way. So it's just a little word of caution that we just need to be cognizant, not only for the on our community when we go out and engage, but also when we hear back from them, and then also for our officers who then have to process it all and deal with it and consider and then implement. So, yeah.
Thank you. I don't need a right of reply, so I'm happy to put the motion that has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please press 1, and those against, please press 2. And I declare the motion carried. Okay. All right, I declare the meeting closed at 12:44 p.m. I'll stand to say to karakia. Everyone else may remain seated. Ona hea, ki te uru, tapanui, kia wātia, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua. I te ara takatū, koia rāia rongo, whakaaria akia ki runga, kia wātia, ai rā, kua wātia. Thank you.